The family vote was unanimous. Dad stays home from Hawaii. I'm Arthur Miller, and I just nodded quietly when my daughter Lisa announced the decision at Sunday dinner. See, they'd all decided I was too much trouble for a family vacation. Too needy, too slow, too many questions about medications and bathroom breaks. Lisa said it was democracy in action, a family vote to protect everyone's good time from their embarrassing father. "We love you, Dad," she explained, cutting her pot roast with surgical precision. "But let's be honest, you ask a million questions. You move slowly. This is supposed to be relaxing." Her husband, Paul, nodded along. "Nothing personal, Arthur, just practical." So I thanked them for their honesty, excused myself to make a phone call, and calmly canceled 5 tickets to Hawaii. All of them. Then I sat back down and waited for the question I knew was coming. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Have you ever been underestimated by people who thought they had you figured out? Because what my family didn't know, what they couldn't see past their assumptions about their needy old father, was about to change everything they thought they knew about who was really taking care of whom in this family. Let me back up 3 months to show you exactly how I became the family burden. It started when I moved into Woodland Assisted Living last September, not because I couldn't take care of myself, mind you, because Lisa decided I needed supervision. The $3,200 monthly fee came straight from my Social Security and pension, which Lisa managed through a power of attorney I'd signed after my wife died 2 years ago. "Dad, you're forgetting things," she'd said, sitting in my old kitchen with a stack of papers. "Yesterday you called me twice asking what time dinner was." What I didn't tell her was that I called twice because I was trying to remember which story I'd told her about my Thursday appointments. The truth about those appointments, well, that's coming later. The assisted living place is nice enough. Clean hallways, activities coordinator named Janet who organizes bingo every Tuesday. My apartment has a kitchenette I barely use because meals are included. Lisa visits twice a week, always with the same concerned expression, like she's checking on a child. The first sign I was becoming a problem came during Thanksgiving dinner at Lisa's house. Her husband Paul was carving the turkey when I asked my usual questions. "Paul, how's your father doing at his new place?" "Fine, Arthur. Same as last week." "The memory care facility in Bloomington?" "Yes, Dad," Lisa interrupted. "Sunrise Memory Care. You ask about it every time." "I just want to make sure he's getting good care. Those places can be expensive." Paul's jaw tightened. "We're managing." "How much does it run, if you don't mind me asking?" The silence stretched long enough for me to count the cranberry sauce stains on Lisa's tablecloth. 3 drops. I always notice details like that. "Dad," Lisa said finally, "that's really not your concern." But I kept asking, not because I was confused, because I was worried. Every Thursday, I drove my 2015 Honda Civic to the bank, then to meetings with people Lisa didn't know about. My hands shook a little more each week, the Parkinson's progressing slowly but steadily. But I never missed those appointments. The second sign came in January during what Lisa called a family meeting about Dad's future. They held it in her living room while I was supposedly napping, but the walls in her house are thin and my hearing is still sharp. "He's getting worse," I heard Lisa say. "More questions, more confusion." "The assisted living place says he's doing fine," Paul replied. "But Paul, he asks about your father constantly. It's like he's obsessed. Maybe because he cares. Or maybe because he's losing it. Yesterday he asked me 3 times about your work schedule. Who needs to know when you have overtime?" I did, because I needed to coordinate my Thursday errands around when Paul would be available to visit his father. Because what Paul didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that someone had been making sure his father got the best possible care. Someone who understood that $12,000 a month for premium memory care doesn't come easy on a middle management salary. The third sign was the medication incident. I'd been taking my Parkinson's medication for 8 months by then, managing the tremors well enough to drive and handle my banking. But one morning in February, Lisa found my pill organizer and noticed I'd missed a dose. "Dad, you forgot your medication yesterday." I took it in the evening instead of morning. The doctor said timing can be flexible. "What doctor? Dr. Peterson didn't say that." She was right. Dr. Peterson wasn't the one who'd said it. That was Dr. Stephen Davis, the neurologist I'd been seeing since my diagnosis. The neurologist Lisa didn't know about because some conversations are too complicated when people already think you're falling apart. I meant Dr. Peterson, I lied. That's when Lisa started talking about supervision and safety concerns. The funny thing about safety concerns is how quickly they become control concerns. Lisa began managing my calendar, my finances, even my grocery shopping. Dad, you don't need to drive to the bank every week. I can handle your deposits. I like the routine. But you're spending more time in the car than necessary. What if you get confused? What if I get confused? The phrase that became Lisa's favorite way to end any discussion about my independence. By March, the pattern was set. Lisa would visit on Tuesdays and Fridays, checking my medication organizer like a prison guard counting contraband. She'd ask about my week, and I'd give her the simplified version. Bingo on Tuesday, walk around the courtyard on Wednesday, physical therapy on Friday. I never mentioned the Thursday appointments, the bank meetings, the legal consultations, the careful coordination that had been keeping her marriage stable for the past 18 months. Because here's what Lisa and Paul couldn't see. I wasn't asking questions because I was confused. I was asking questions because I was managing a situation they didn't even know existed. When you're secretly handling someone's biggest financial stress, you need to stay informed about their schedule, their mood, their relationship dynamics. Every question about Paul's work schedule helped me time my payments, so he wouldn't notice the sudden ease in their budget. Every inquiry about his father's care helped me monitor whether my anonymous contributions were making a difference. But to Lisa, those questions looked like decline. To Paul, they looked like inappropriate curiosity. To both of them, they looked like evidence that old Arthur was becoming more trouble than he was worth. The irony hit me every Tuesday during bingo. Janet would call out B7, and I'd mark my card with hands that shook just enough to make other residents nod knowingly. Poor Arthur. His daughter visits to check on him. Such a good girl, taking care of her failing father. If they only knew that their failing father had been taken care of more than anyone realized. The breaking point came on a cold Tuesday in March when I overheard Lisa and Paul arguing in her kitchen. I'd arrived early for our scheduled visit and found them in the middle of what sounded like a familiar fight. We can't keep doing this, Lisa. Paul's voice carried the exhaustion of months of financial stress. The overtime is killing me, and we're still barely making ends meet. I know, but what choice do we have? Dad's facility costs alone are eating through our savings. I froze by the front door, my hand still on the brass doorknob that needed polish. Your father's facility? Paul asked. No, yours. Sunrise Memory Care. Paul, we're spending $18,000 a month between his care and our regular expenses. $18,000. That's more than my salary. My heart did something complicated. They thought they were paying $18,000 monthly for Paul's father's care, but Sunrise Memory Care only cost $12,000. I knew because I'd been writing the checks for 18 months. So where did Lisa get $18,000? Maybe we need to look at less expensive options, Paul said quietly. What less expensive options? The state facility has a 6-month waiting list, and you've seen what those places look like. Your father would deteriorate in weeks. Then maybe I need to take a second job. Paul, you're already working 60-hour weeks. When would you sleep? I stood there in the February cold, understanding for the first time what my silence was costing them. Not just the money, though the money was crushing them. It was the guilt. The impossible choice between Paul's father's care and their own financial survival. They thought they were spending money they didn't have on care they couldn't afford. They thought they were choosing between Paul's father's dignity and their own future. They thought they were trapped in a situation with no good answers. Because I hadn't told them that someone else was carrying the heaviest part of their burden. For 18 months, I'd watched Lisa stress about money she wasn't actually spending. I'd watched Paul work overtime to pay for care that was already covered. I'd watched their marriage strain under financial pressure that didn't really exist. All because I'd chosen to help anonymously. All because I thought it was better to let them think they were handling their responsibilities themselves, rather than accepting charity from Lisa's declining father. Maybe we should talk to your dad, Paul said. See if he has any ideas. Lisa's laugh was bitter. Paul,
Dad asks the same questions every week. He can barely manage his own medication schedule. What's he going to do? Solve our financial crisis? If only she knew. But here's what I realized, standing in that cold doorway. My silence wasn't protecting their pride. It was destroying their peace. Every month I stayed anonymous. They sank deeper into stress that didn't need to exist. Every month I let them think I was becoming a burden. They lost a little more faith in my ability to help with anything. The stakes weren't just about money anymore. They were about what kind of family we were going to be.
Would we be the family where the strong took care of the weak? Or would we be the family where everyone contributed what they could, and no one carried burdens alone? Lisa's voice drifted through the door again. Sometimes I wonder if we should have Dad assessed, make sure he's still competent to make his own decisions. Lisa, that's harsh. Is it? Paul, he's clearly struggling. The questions, the confusion, the way he just stares sometimes like he's lost. Maybe we need to consider more intensive care. More intensive care. Translation, less independence, less dignity, less Arthur. That's when I understood the real stakes. If I stayed silent much longer, I wouldn't just be watching them struggle financially. I'd be watching Lisa convince herself that her father needed to be managed like a child. I'd be watching my own autonomy disappear, one safety concern at a time. The choice became clear. I could keep playing the role of the declining father who needed careful management, or I could reveal the truth and deal with whatever came after. But there was a third option, one that would teach them something about assumptions and respect, and the dangerous habit of making decisions for people they'd written off. I could let them make their democratic choice about Hawaii, and then I could show them exactly what happens when you vote out the wrong person. I turned around and walked back to my car, leaving their argument unfinished. Some conversations needed to happen on my terms, not theirs. The family meeting about Hawaii was still 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for a lesson they'd never forget. Sunday dinner at Lisa's house always started the same way. Paul carved the roast. Lisa served vegetables from her good china. I asked about everyone's week and got polite, abbreviated answers. But this Sunday felt different. Lisa had mentioned a family discussion when she invited me. Paul kept checking his phone. And there was an extra notebook next to Lisa's placemat, the kind she used for serious business. Dad, we need to talk about the Hawaii trip, Lisa said as she passed the mashed potatoes. What about it? Well, we've been thinking. Planning a family vacation is complicated with different needs and energy levels. Different needs, I repeated. Paul cleared his throat. Arthur, you've been having some challenges lately. The questions, the confusion, the slower pace. We're worried about how you'd handle traveling. I set down my fork and looked at my daughter. Challenges. Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. You asked me 4 times this week what time we were having dinner. You called Paul twice yesterday asking when he gets home from work. You seem confused about routine things. And Lisa opened her notebook. Actual notes for a conversation about voting her father out of a family vacation. And we think it would be better for everyone if this Hawaii trip was just Paul and me and the kids. A smaller group, less stress, easier logistics. You think it would be better? We voted, Paul said quickly. Family vote, democratic process. Democratic process. I took a sip of water, buying time to control my voice. Who exactly got to vote in this democracy? The adults, Lisa said. Paul and me. We discussed it thoroughly. And the person most affected by the vote didn't get a say. Dad, you're not thinking clearly about this. Yesterday you asked me 3 times whether we needed passports for Hawaii. Hawaii is a U.S. state. That's basic geography. I had asked about passports 3 times. Because I was trying to figure out whether Paul's father had current identification for emergencies, and whether that was something I needed to help coordinate. But explaining that would require explaining why I cared so much about Paul's father's logistics. So you voted me out. We voted for what's best for the family, Paul said. Arthur, this isn't personal. We're worried about you wandering off in an unfamiliar place, getting confused about meal times, needing constant supervision. Constant supervision. Lisa leaned forward with her counselor voice. Dad, last week you forgot where you parked at the grocery store. You called me in a panic. I had called her, because I'd parked in a different section while visiting the bank across the street, and I wanted to make sure she knew I was running late for our Tuesday visit. But again, explaining that would require explaining the bank visits. and that means I can't handle a family vacation. It means we're concerned about your safety and everyone else's peace of mind, Lisa said, consulting her notes. We've researched it. Travel can be very disorienting for people with cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. Dad, stop repeating everything we say. You're doing it again. The repeating wasn't confusion. It was self-control. Every time I repeated one of their phrases, I bought myself 3 seconds to decide whether to reveal the truth or let this play out to its inevitable conclusion. I chose to let it play out. Okay, I said. Lisa blinked. Okay? You've made your decision. Family democracy. I respect that. Paul and Lisa exchanged glances. They'd clearly prepared for more resistance. You're not upset? Lisa asked. Should I be upset about your concern for my safety? Well, no, but then I'm not upset. I understand your reasoning. You see someone who's confused, slow, asking too many questions. You see someone who would be a burden on your vacation. Dad, you're not a burden, Paul said quickly. Aren't I? Lisa just finished explaining why I need constant supervision, why I get confused about basic things, why I would ruin everyone's peace of mind. That sounds like a burden to me. That's not what we meant, Lisa said. Then what did you mean? Silence, long enough for me to count the ice cubes melting in my water glass. 4 cubes down to 3. We meant we want everyone to enjoy themselves, Paul finally said. Everyone except me. Dad, you can enjoy yourself at home. Plan your own activities. Maybe this is good timing for you to focus on your own needs. My own needs? That's interesting advice, Lisa. Focus on my own needs. Yes, take care of yourself without worrying about everyone else. Without worrying about everyone else, I repeated. Dad, you're doing it again. I stood up slowly, letting my hand shake just enough on the table edge, playing the part they'd written for me. I need to make a phone call. Dad, we're in the middle of dinner. I'll be quick. Just need to cancel something. I walked to the kitchen, pulled out my cell phone, and dialed Hawaiian Gardens Resort. Yes, this is Arthur Miller. I need to cancel a reservation for 5 guests, March 22nd through 29th. Confirmation number HG7,841. Sir, I show that reservation was for 5 people with a total cost of $8,500. Are you sure you want to cancel the entire booking? Yes, the entire booking. Sir, that's a significant penalty for canceling less than 2 weeks out. You'll forfeit the full deposit of $2,100. I understand. I could hear Lisa and Paul's conversation stop in the dining room, their forks hitting the plates, the scrape of chairs being pushed back. Dad? Lisa's voice carried a note I hadn't heard before. Dad, what are you doing? I finished the call and walked back to the table. Taking care of my own needs like you suggested. You canceled our flights? I canceled my flights, all 5 of them, since I paid for the entire trip. Paul's face went white. You paid for the trip? Family democracy, Paul. I respect your vote, but my money votes too. The silence after my phone call lasted exactly 17 seconds. I counted. Lisa was the first to find her voice. Dad, what do you mean you paid for the trip? Hawaiian Gardens Resort, 5 guests, Ocean View Suite, March 22nd through 29th. $8,500 charged to my credit card last month. Paul's fork clattered against his plate. Arthur, you don't have that kind of money. Don't I? Your Social Security and pension barely cover the assisted living costs, Lisa said, flipping through her notebook like the answers were hidden in her careful notes. I manage your finances, remember? There's no way you have $8,500 for a vacation. You manage some of my finances. What does that mean? I sat back down, taking my time with the napkin placement. Let them wonder. Dad, answer the question. What does that mean? It means you manage the accounts you know about. Lisa's face did something interesting. A progression from confusion to concern to something approaching panic. What accounts don't I know about? The ones connected to my Thursday appointments. Your Thursday appointments are physical therapy at the assisted living facility. Sometimes. Paul leaned forward. Arthur, where do you go on Thursdays? Different places. Depends on what needs handling. What needs handling? Lisa's voice was getting higher. Dad, you're not making sense. But I was making perfect sense. For the first time in months, I was being completely honest. The problem was that my honesty revealed how much I'd been hiding. Last Thursday, I went to First National Bank, had a meeting with Jennifer Anderson, the branch manager. We discussed some transfers that needed to be processed. Transfers to what? That's confidential. Dad, I have power of attorney. Nothing about your finances is confidential from me. You have power of attorney over the accounts you know about, I repeated. The checking account with your name on it.
The savings account we set up for emergencies. The investment account Dr. Peterson's office sends the bills to. There are other accounts? I didn't answer. Sometimes silence teaches better lessons than explanations. Lisa was flipping through her notebook frantically now. Dad, this is serious. If you have accounts I don't know about, if you're making financial decisions without supervision, I let that phrase hang in the air. Lisa, what exactly do you think I need supervision for? For your confusion, your memory problems, the way you ask the same questions over and over. And what if those questions aren't confusion? What if they're information gathering? Paul's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. That's weird. Text from my dad's care facility. They want to schedule a meeting about his benefactor status. What does that mean? My heart rate picked up, but I kept my voice steady. No idea.
Dad. Lisa closed her notebook and looked directly at me. I need you to tell me exactly what's going on with these Thursday appointments. Why? Because I'm worried about you. Because people with cognitive decline can make poor financial decisions. Because I need to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. By who? By anyone. Banks, lawyers, people who prey on elderly people with diminished capacity. Diminished capacity. I stood up again, this time without the calculated tremor. Lisa, what if my capacity isn't diminished? What if it's just different from what you expected? What do you mean? What if the father who asks too many questions and moves too slowly and needs constant supervision has been handling responsibilities you can't even imagine? Paul's phone buzzed again. Another text. He read it and looked up with an expression I'd never seen before. Arthur, this message says, Sunrise Memory Care wants to discuss my father's anonymous benefactor. Someone who's been covering significant costs for the past 18 months. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. That sounds like something you should look into. Dad, where are you going? Home. I have some calls to make. Some appointments to schedule. What appointments? Thursday appointments. The kind that require supervision. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Lisa, you might want to clear your calendar for next Tuesday. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to discuss. Tuesday morning started with 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first call came at 7:30 a.m. while I was organizing my morning medications. Lisa, her voice tight with a panic I hadn't heard since her mother's cancer diagnosis. Dad, I need you to explain something to me. I spent yesterday going through every financial record I can find, and there are gaps. Big gaps. Gaps? Don't play word games with me. Your Social Security goes into the main checking account. Your pension goes into savings. But there's another income source I can't track. Something that's been depositing $3,500 every month for the past 2 years. $3,500. Not quite enough to cover my Parkinson's medication costs, my additional insurance, and the monthly payments to Sunrise Memory Care. But enough to raise questions. Maybe there's a mistake in the records. Dad, I'm coming over. We're going to sit down and you're going to explain every single account, every single payment, every single Thursday appointment. I can't today. Why not? I have an appointment. Cancel it. I can't. Dad, this is serious. Paul's been trying to reach his father's care facility since Sunday, and they keep saying they need to speak to the family benefactor before they can discuss his father's account. What do you know about that? Everything, but not over the phone. Lisa, some conversations need to happen in person, with witnesses. Witnesses? Dad, what are you talking about? Meet me at Sunrise Memory Care at 2 p.m. Bring Paul. Why? Because it's time for the truth. The second call came at 11 a.m. from Catherine Brown, the director at Sunrise Memory Care. Mr. Miller, we have a situation. Paul Wilson has been calling repeatedly about his father's account, and we can't give him information without your authorization as the primary benefactor. What kind of information? Payment history, Care upgrades. The memory garden dedication ceremony this afternoon. He doesn't seem to understand that his father's care has been covered by an anonymous donor for the past 18 months. Not anonymous anymore. Sir? Catherine, I need you to do something for me. At today's ceremony, I want you to make the benefactor recognition public. Full disclosure. Are you sure? We've maintained confidentiality at your request. I'm sure. And Catherine? Paul Wilson and his family will be attending. Make sure they're in the front row. The third call came at noon from Paul himself. Arthur, I don't understand what's happening. Lisa is driving around frantically trying to piece together your finances. The care facility won't talk to me about my own father. And now they're insisting we attend some ceremony this afternoon. You should go. Why? What does a memory care ceremony have to do with us? Paul, how long has your father been at Sunrise Memory Care? 18 months. Since his diagnosis got worse. And how have you been paying for it? Silence. Long enough for me to hear him thinking through the math he'd been avoiding. We've been managing. Overtime pay, some savings. It's been tight, but we've been managing. $12,000 a month, Paul. Times 18 months. That's $216,000. Arthur, why are you... How much overtime pay do you make? Another silence. Paul. Not enough for that. Arthur, what are you saying? I'm saying you should attend the ceremony. And Paul, bring a calculator. By 1:45 p.m., I was sitting in the memory garden at Sunrise Memory Care, watching families gather for the monthly recognition ceremony. These events honored families and donors who'd made exceptional contributions to patient care. I'd attended several times before, always sitting in the back, always declining Catherine's invitations to be recognized. Today would be different. Paul and Lisa arrived at exactly 2 p.m., both looking like they'd spent the day wrestling with impossible math. Lisa carried her notebook and a folder of bank statements. Paul carried the expression of a man who'd started to suspect something that couldn't possibly be true. Catherine Brown approached them with practiced professionalism. Mr. Wilson, I'm Catherine Brown, the facility director. Thank you for coming. Miss Brown, I need to discuss my father's account. There seems to be some confusion about payments. There's no confusion, Mr. Wilson. Your father's care has been fully covered by a benefactor since his admission. Today's ceremony will clarify everything. Lisa spotted me across the garden and started walking over with the determination of a prosecutor approaching a hostile witness. Dad, what are you doing here? Same thing you are, attending a ceremony. What ceremony? What does this have to do with anything? It has to do with Thursday appointments. Paul joined us, his face pale but his voice controlled. Arthur, I've been thinking about the numbers. The money we thought we were spending on Dad's care. The overtime I've been working. Something doesn't add up. What doesn't add up? We don't have $200,000. We never had $200,000. So how has my father been getting premium care for 18 months? Before I could answer, Catherine's voice came over the small sound system. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sunrise Memory Care's monthly appreciation ceremony. Today we're recognizing families and donors whose generosity has made exceptional care possible for our residents. She began reading names of family members who'd volunteered time, organized events, contributed to patient activities, standard recognition ceremony material. Then her tone shifted. Today we have a special recognition. For the past 18 months, one of our residents has received full care coverage from an anonymous benefactor. This donor has contributed over $200,000 to ensure that financial stress doesn't interfere with family relationships during a difficult time. Lisa's notebook fell to the ground. Today, that benefactor has chosen to reveal his identity. Mr. Arthur Miller, would you please join me? Paul made a sound like he'd been punched. I stood up slowly, letting my hand shake just enough to remind everyone that I was still the 69-year-old man with Parkinson's they thought they knew. But I walked to the front of the garden with steady steps. Mr. Miller has been covering all costs for resident Harold Wilson, including care, medications, therapy, and facility upgrades. His generosity has allowed the Wilson family to focus on emotional support rather than financial survival. I turned to look at Paul and Lisa. Paul was sitting down heavily on a bench. Lisa was staring at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Mr. Miller, would you like to say something to the Wilson family? I took the microphone and looked at my daughter and son-in-law.
Sometimes the people who ask the most questions are the ones carrying the most answers. The memorial garden fell completely silent, except for the sound of Paul Wilson trying to breathe.
Catherine Brown handed me a folder thick with documentation, 18 months of payment records, care reports, and facility upgrades that I had authorized for Harold Wilson's treatment.
"Paul," I said, my voice carrying across the garden to where he sat frozen on the bench. "Your father's monthly care cost is $12,000. Premium memory care, private room, specialized therapy, the works." Paul's lips moved, but no sound came out. "Times 18 months, that's $216,000. Not $200,000 like I said earlier. I was rounding down." Lisa had picked up her notebook but wasn't writing, just holding it like an anchor. "Now, Paul, I need you to do some math for me. What's your annual salary?" "62,000, he whispered. "62,000. After taxes, that's what, maybe 45,000 take home?" "About that." "So, if you'd been paying for your father's care yourself, it would have cost you almost 5 years of your entire salary, just for 18 months of care." The other ceremony attendees were starting to understand they were witnessing something more than a standard donor recognition. "But here's the interesting part," I continued, looking directly at Lisa. "You've been managing my finances for 2 years. You think you know exactly what I can and can't afford. So where did $216,000 come from?" "Dad, I don't understand." "That's because you've been managing the wrong accounts." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, bank statements from First National, account number ending in 4291. This account receives monthly deposits from 3 sources. Disability benefits for my Parkinson's diagnosis, a diagnosis I never told you about because you already thought I was declining. Consulting fees from Miller Financial Advisory, the business I ran for 30 years before I retired, a business that still has clients who pay for advice, and investment returns from a portfolio I've been managing since your mother died. Paul was standing now, moving closer like he couldn't hear properly from a distance. "The disability payments alone are $1,800 a month. The consulting fees vary but average around $2,000. Investment returns are usually $500 to $800 monthly." "Dad, that's over $4,000 a month," Lisa said. $4,200 on average. More than enough to cover your father-in-law's care, Paul, and still help with my own medical expenses." I pulled out the second set of documents. Payment receipts from Sunrise Memory Care, each one showing anonymous benefactor as the payment source. "Catherine, would you explain to Paul what premium care includes for his father?" Catherine stepped forward with her own folder. "Harold Wilson receives private nursing care, specialized physical therapy, cognitive stimulation programs, and nutritional support designed specifically for his condition. His room includes adaptive equipment and 24-hour monitoring. The total package represents the highest level of memory care available." "And how has he responded to this level of care?" "Remarkably well. Harold's cognitive function has stabilized and in some areas improved. His physical health is excellent. He's participating in social activities and has maintained much of his personality and humor." Paul's voice cracked. "He calls me by name every time I visit. I thought that was normal." "Mr. Wilson, many patients at Harold's stage of dementia lose name recognition within months. Your father's retention is exceptional, largely due to the comprehensive care program his benefactor made possible." I handed Paul the payment records. "Every Thursday I drive to the bank. Jennifer Anderson, the branch manager, processes a $12,000 transfer from my consulting account to Sunrise Memory Care. Then I drive here to check on your father's progress." "You visit my father?" "Harold knows me as Arthur from the Garden Committee. We talk about woodworking. He's teaching me to whittle. Made me a small bird last month." Paul was looking at the payment records like they were written in code. "Arthur, why didn't you tell us?" "Because you needed to believe you were handling your responsibilities yourselves." "But we weren't. We thought we were going broke trying to care for him." "No, Paul. You were going broke trying to care for him while also maintaining your pride. I eliminated the financial pressure so you could focus on being his son instead of his accountant." Lisa had been quiet through this entire exchange, but now she stepped forward with the expression I couldn't read. "Dad, you let us think you were confused. Declining. You let me treat you like a child." "Yes." "Why?" This was the question I'd been preparing for since Sunday dinner. "Lisa,
If I'd told you 18 months ago that I wanted to pay for Paul's father's care, what would you have said? She considered this. I would have said it was too much money, that it wasn't your responsibility. And if I'd insisted, I would have said you were being impulsive, maybe not thinking clearly. And if I'd told you I had been diagnosed with Parkinson's and was seeing a neurologist you didn't know about, her face crumpled, I would have panicked. I would have tried to take over everything. And if I'd told you I was still consulting for former clients and managing a significant investment portfolio, I would have worried you were taking on too much stress. So instead, I let you think I was declining. I let you manage the accounts you knew about, and I used the accounts you didn't know about to handle the problem you couldn't solve. Paul was still staring at the documents. Arthur, this says the payment started 2 weeks after Dad moved into memory care. I know. How did you even know he needed help? Because you were working 80-hour weeks, and Lisa was crying every Tuesday when she visited me. Because you both looked exhausted every time I saw you. Because when someone you care about is drowning, you throw them a life preserver. You don't ask permission first. The ceremony crowd had dispersed during our conversation, leaving just our family, Catherine, and the quiet sounds of the memory garden. But Dad, Lisa said, you let us vote you out of Hawaii. You let us treat you like a burden. Because you needed to learn something about assumptions. About what happens when you make decisions for people you've written off. We didn't write you off. Lisa, 3 days ago you told Paul I needed to be assessed for competency. You said I was embarrassing and confused and too much work for a family vacation. She had no answer for that. Paul, you said this wasn't personal. Just practical. That I needed constant supervision. Paul was looking at me with an expression that might have been awe or horror or both. The truth is, I've been supervising more than you realized. And when you voted to exclude me from the family, you voted to exclude someone who's been holding the family together. I walked over to Paul and handed him the complete file. Every payment record, every care report, every medical update on your father's condition, it's all yours now. Arthur, I don't understand. Are you saying you're going to stop helping? I'm saying the help was never anonymous. It was invisible. There's a difference. What difference? Anonymous means you don't know who's helping. Invisible means you know who's helping, but you can't see it because of your assumptions about who that person is. I looked at both of them, my daughter who thought she was protecting me from my own poor judgment, and my son-in-law who thought he was failing at the most important responsibility of his life. I'm not stopping the payments, Paul. Your father needs this level of care, and he's going to get it. But I'm done being invisible. What does that mean? It means from now on you're going to know exactly who's helping you and why, and you're going to treat that person with the respect they've earned. Lisa's voice was very small. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry isn't enough anymore. What do you want from us? I want you to see me as I actually am, not as the declining father you've decided I am. I want my questions treated like requests for information, not signs of confusion. And I want my opinions treated like opinions, not symptoms. Paul was nodding slowly. That's fair. And I want to go to Hawaii. Of course, Dad. Of course you can go to Hawaii. No, Lisa, I don't want permission to go to Hawaii. I want to be invited to go to Hawaii by people who understand that the person they're inviting has been taking care of them more than they knew. The memorial garden had grown quiet, except for the sound of water moving through the fountain and the distant voices of patients and families inside the facility. There's one more thing, I said. What? I want you to meet your father-in-law properly, Harold Wilson, the man whose care you thought was bankrupting your family. He's been asking me about you, Paul. He wants to know why his son looks so tired all the time. He asks about me. Every Thursday. He's very proud of you. Keeps telling me about the responsible young man who visits him twice a week and always brings pictures of his family. Paul started to cry. Just quiet tears, but unmistakable. He remembers the pictures. He remembers everything that matters, Paul. Thanks to the care someone made sure he could afford. The drive back to Woodland Assisted Living gave me 20 minutes to think about what came next. Paul and Lisa had stayed at Sunrise Memory Care to meet with Catherine Brown about Harold's care plan, and to visit with Harold himself, a conversation that was 18 months overdue. But I had my own conversations to prepare for. The first call I made was to my attorney, Margaret Anderson, Jennifer's sister and someone who'd been helping me structure my finances since Ellen died. "Margaret, it's Arthur Miller. The family knows about the Sunrise payments." "How did they take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Shock, guilt, confusion. But Arthur, we need to discuss the legal implications. If Lisa challenges your competency, she won't. How can you be sure?" "Because she just watched me demonstrate competency in front of witnesses, including a medical facility director who can testify to my decision-making capacity over 18 months. "That's smart. But Arthur, there's something else we need to address. The Hawaii trip." "What about it?" "You canceled a family vacation to make a point. Lisa could argue that's impulsive behavior, possibly related to your Parkinson's." "I hadn't considered that angle." "What do you recommend?" "Reinstate the trip, but on your terms. Show that you made a calculated decision, not an emotional reaction." "Margaret, I'm not sure I want to go to Hawaii with people who just spent 3 days treating me like a burden." "Then don't go with them. Go ahead of them." "What do you mean?" "Book yourself a separate trip. Same dates, same location. Let them decide whether they want to join you or not. It demonstrates independence, financial control, and puts the choice back on them." That was either brilliant or petty, possibly both. The second call was to Hawaiian Gardens Resort. "Yes, this is Arthur Miller. I canceled a reservation yesterday. Confirmation HG 7841. I need to reinstate it, but with modifications." "Sir, I showed that booking was for 5 guests. Would you like the same arrangement?" "No. I want 1 guest, Ocean View Suite, March 22nd through 29th. Just me." "And the other 4 guests?" "If they want to join me, they can make their own reservations." "Sir, the Ocean View Suites for those dates are quite expensive for a single occupant. $2,400 per night for 7 nights is $16,800, plus taxes and fees, probably $18,000 total. I understand." "Are you sure about a single occupancy?" "I'm sure, and I'd like to arrange 1 additional service." "What service?" "I'll be celebrating a family reunion. I want to reserve the private dining room for March 25th, Wednesday evening, for up to 5 people. The private dining room requires a minimum guarantee of $1,200. "Not a problem." "Should I list this as a definite reservation or tentative?" "Definite for me, tentative for the others. They'll decide whether they want to join me." The third call was the hardest one. "Lisa, it's Dad." "Dad, where are you? Paul and I wanted to talk more about—" "I'm at home, and I have something to tell you." "What?" "I've reinstated the Hawaii trip." Silence. Then, "Dad, that's wonderful. We can all go together and—" "No, Lisa, I've booked a trip for myself. Same dates, same hotel. If you want to join me, you can make your own arrangements." "I don't understand." "You voted me out of the family vacation, so I'm taking my own vacation. You're welcome to join me if you want to." "Dad, that's not how family vacations work. It is when the family doesn't act like family." Another silence. Longer this time. "Lisa, you're there?" "Dad, are you punishing us?" "I'm establishing boundaries." "What boundaries?" "The boundary between being family and being treated like family. You can be my daughter without treating me like your child. Paul can be my son-in-law without treating me like his burden. We don't think you're a burden." "Lisa, 3 days ago you held a family vote about whether I was too much trouble for a vacation. That's not how you treat someone you respect." "We were trying to protect you." "From what?" From being overwhelmed, from getting confused in an unfamiliar place." "And if I'd gotten confused, what would have happened?" "We would have helped you. But instead of finding out whether I needed help, you decided I wasn't capable of handling the challenge." Lisa was quiet for a long time. "Dad, what do you want from us?" "I want you to treat me like the person who's been taking care of your family for 18 months. I want you to ask me questions instead of making assumptions about my answers. And I want you to understand that respect isn't something you withdraw when someone gets older or slower or asks too many questions." "How do we do that?" "Start by deciding whether you want to come to Hawaii with me, not because you feel guilty, and not because you think I need supervision, because you want to spend time with your father. And if we decide not to come, then I'll have a very peaceful vacation by myself, and you'll have learned something about what it feels like to be voted out of your own family." The response came faster than I expected. By Thursday, My usual appointment day. I had 3 voicemails, 2 text messages, and a knock on my apartment door that turned out to be Lisa, carrying a box of bakery cookies and wearing the expression of someone who'd spent 2 sleepless nights thinking. "Dad, we booked flights to Hawaii." "You did?" "Paul found a hotel 2 blocks from yours. We'll have our own space, but we can spend time together if you want to." I invited her in and put on coffee, noting that she didn't automatically start organizing my medication schedule or checking my refrigerator for expired food. Small progress. "Lisa, why did you change your mind?" "Because Paul spent yesterday calculating numbers, not just the money you've been paying for his father's care, but everything else." "Everything else?" "The overtime he didn't have to work because his father's care was covered. The promotions he got because he wasn't constantly stressed about money. The vacation days he could take because he wasn't picking up extra shifts. Dad, your invisible help didn't just pay for care. It gave Paul his career back." "And?" "And I spent yesterday thinking about all the times you asked questions I thought were confusion. About Paul's work schedule, about his father's medical appointments, about our finances. And you weren't confused. You were managing a situation we didn't even know existed." I poured coffee into 2 mugs, the good china that Lisa had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago, back when she still thought I could handle nice things. "There's something else," Lisa said. "Catherine Brown called yesterday." "About what?" "About Harold Wilson's progress reports. She said you've been getting copies of every medical update for 18 months, that you've been tracking his cognitive improvement, his physical therapy progress, his social integration. He's doing well." "Dad, she said he's doing better than well. She said his improvement has been remarkable, and it's directly connected to the level of care you made possible." "Good. Good? Dad, you probably saved that man's mind. Do you understand that?" I understood it perfectly. That had been the point. She also said something else, about the other families in the memory care unit. What about them? 3 other patients have anonymous benefactors covering their care, all coordinated through First National Bank, all managed by someone who insists on staying invisible. I sipped my coffee and waited. "Dad, how many families are you helping?" "That's confidential information." "Between the bank and who?" "Between the bank and the beneficiaries." Lisa set down her coffee cup with the careful precision of someone trying not to make accusations. "Dad, are you running some kind of informal charity?" "I'm using my consulting income and investment returns to solve problems for people I care about." "How many people do you care about?" "More than you realized." We sat in my small living room, surrounded by the furniture Lisa had chosen for me when I moved into assisted living. Safe furniture, easy to clean furniture, furniture for someone who might fall or spill or forget to turn off appliances. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay. Are you actually declining? Cognitively, I mean. Or have you been letting me think you are?" This was the question that would determine everything about our relationship going forward. "Lisa, I have Parkinson's disease. My hands shake. My balance is sometimes uncertain. My medication makes me tired. But my mind is sharper than it's been in years. Why? Because I have purpose again. Because I'm solving problems that matter. Because I'm not sitting around waiting to be taken care of. I'm taking care of other people. Even though we thought you needed to be taken care of. Especially because you thought that." Lisa stood up and walked to my small kitchen window, looking out at the assisted living courtyard where other residents were taking their afternoon walks. "Dad, I've been a terrible daughter." "No, Lisa, you've been a daughter who was afraid of losing her father. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Fear makes people controlling. Love makes people supportive. You've been afraid, now you get to choose whether to be loving." She turned back to me with tears in her eyes. "How do I fix this?" "You don't fix it. You learn from it." "What do I need to learn?" "That help doesn't always look the way you expect it to look. That strength doesn't always move at the speed you think it should. And that the people who ask the most questions might be the ones with the most answers." We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. Then Lisa asked the question I'd been hoping for. "Dad, will you teach me how to help the way you help?" "What do you mean?" "I want to understand what you're doing. The consulting, the investment management, the family support network." I want to learn how to be useful instead of just protective. That was exactly the right question. Yes, Lisa, but it means treating me like a teacher, not a patient. I understand. And it means some Thursday appointments are going to include you. I'd like that. And it means the conversation about competency assessments is permanently off the table. Dad, I'm sorry I ever suggested that. I know you are. But sorry isn't the same as changed behavior. What do you need to see? I need to see you asking me for advice instead of managing my decisions. I need to see you including me in family planning instead of making plans for me. And I need to see you treating my questions like information gathering instead of signs of confusion. Lisa nodded slowly. That's fair. And Lisa? Yeah? I need to see you treating your father like someone who might know more than you do about taking care of family. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on a balcony overlooking Waikiki Beach, reading financial reports and waiting for my family to join me for dinner. Lisa and Paul had arrived 3 days ago. They'd maintained their separate hotel, but we'd been spending meals together and taking walks along the beach. The conversations were different now. More questions about my consulting work, fewer suggestions about my medication schedule. More requests for my opinion, fewer assumptions about my limitations. Paul had started bringing me updates about his father's progress at Sunrise Memory Care. Harold was participating in woodworking therapy and had asked to meet the Arthur who visits on Thursdays. We'd scheduled that introduction for when we returned home, but the biggest change was in how they talked to me. Lisa had stopped using her managing an elderly parent voice. Paul had stopped speaking slowly and over-articulating like I might not understand. They were treating me like Arthur Miller, family financial advisor and problem solver, instead of Arthur Miller, aging father who needed careful supervision. There was a knock on my suite door, Lisa's voice calling, "Dad, we're ready for dinner." I gathered my papers, checked that my evening medications were in my pocket, and walked to the door. My hands shook slightly as I turned the handle. The Parkinson's hadn't changed, but the tremor felt different now, like a physical fact, instead of evidence of incompetence. "Coming," I called back. We had reservations for 4 at the hotel restaurant. The 4th place setting was for Paul's father, Harold, who would be joining us by video call from Sunrise Memory Care, technology that Lisa had arranged and I had taught her how to use. It was going to be a good evening, the kind of evening that happens when families decide to see each other clearly instead of through the filter of their own fears. Sometimes the most important family votes aren't about who gets excluded. Sometimes they're about who gets invited back in. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you've ever discovered that someone you underestimated was actually the one holding everything together.